In February 2025, Ford's CEO Jim Farley sounded the alarm. It wasn't just another quarterly update or a routine press conference. Farley's words echoed through the halls of Detroit and across the entire American auto industry. He warned that a storm was coming, one that could shake the very foundations of the Motor City and threaten the livelihoods of millions. President Trump's proposed 25% tariff on goods from Mexico and Canada would devastate the U.S. auto industry. The announcement sent shockwaves through boardrooms and factory floors alike. For decades, the auto industry had relied on a tightly woven supply chain that stretched across North America, with parts and vehicles crossing borders seamlessly. Now that system was under threat. This wasn't just corporate posturing. It was a genuine warning from Detroit's heart. Executives, union leaders, and workers all understood the stakes. The Motor City had weathered recessions, bankruptcies, and fierce global competition. But this was different. The threat was immediate, and the consequences could be catastrophic. By March, the threat became reality. The tariffs hit, targeting nearly all goods crossing the border. Suddenly, the flow of essential parts and materials was disrupted. Trucks lined up at border crossings, facing new inspections and delays. Factories that once ran like clockwork now faced uncertainty with every shipment. Suddenly, everything from avocados to car parts was about to get pricier, and millions of jobs were at risk. The cost of doing business soared overnight. For families, it meant higher prices at the grocery store and the dealership. For workers, it meant worrying about paychecks and job security. The American car industry, a symbol of national pride, was caught in a trade war it never wanted. Generations of workers had built their lives around these factories, and now their future was uncertain. The sense of pride and purpose that defined Detroit was being tested like never before. The fallout would ripple from corporate giants to small suppliers, dealers, and every car buyer in America. Small businesses that supplied parts or serviced vehicles faced the same uncertainty as the industry's biggest names. No one was immune from the impact. This wasn't an abstract debate. It was about the price of a family car and the security of American jobs. For many, it was about whether they could afford their next vehicle or if their job would still be there next month. The anxiety was real, and it was everywhere. Farley's warning was for the country. American factories could fall silent, not from lack of demand, but because parts were trapped behind a tariff wall. The hum of machinery, the lifeblood of the Motor City, was at risk of being silenced by politics and policy. This is the story of how that wall was built and the chaos it unleashed. It's a story of unintended consequences, of families and businesses caught in the crossfire, and of a proud industry forced to fight for its survival. Let's see how a simple policy became a national crisis, reshaping the future of the American auto industry and the lives of millions who depend on it. A tariff is a tax on imported goods, and while that might sound straightforward, the impact is anything but simple. Tariffs are one of the oldest tools in the economic playbook, used by governments for centuries to influence trade and protect their own industries. But in today's globalized world, the effects ripple far beyond the border. The main idea is to protect domestic industries by making foreign products more expensive, giving local companies a better shot at competing. In theory, this should help American factories and workers by leveling the playing field. President Trump's America First tariffs were pitched as a way to bring jobs back to the U.S. and punish what he called unfair trade practices by other countries. The message was clear: protect American workers, revive American manufacturing, and make foreign competitors pay. But here's the catch: when the U.S. slaps a 25% tariff on a car part from Mexico, it's not the Mexican supplier who pays that extra cost. It's Ford or GM or any American company that relies on those parts to build cars here at home. Ford can either absorb the cost, which eats into their profits, or pass it along to consumers by raising car prices. And in a competitive market, those higher prices can make a big difference for families shopping for a new car. In reality, tariffs often become a hidden tax on Americans, not on foreign companies. The extra cost shows up in the sticker price, in your monthly payment, or even in the price of replacement parts. The intention may be to punish other countries, but the bill lands right on your doorstep. It's an invisible cost that most people don't see until it's time to pay. Economics professor John Rogers put it simply: tariffs raise prices for U.S. consumers. It's a lesson taught in every introductory economics class, but one that's easy to overlook in the heat of a political debate. It's not a magic fix. It's a blunt tool that often causes more pain at home than abroad. Higher costs can slow down factories, threaten jobs, and even lead to layoffs if companies can't compete. The theory sounds patriotic, and the slogans are catchy, but the reality is far more complicated and far more costly for American families and businesses. Let's take a closer look at why the auto industry, with its complex supply chains and global parts, is especially vulnerable to tariffs, and what that means for everyone from factory workers to car buyers. When you see a car labeled "Made in America," it's easy to picture every bolt and screw coming together right here in the US, but the reality is far more complex. Most of these cars are actually made in North America, the result of a vast, interconnected network of factories and suppliers stretching across the US, Canada, and Mexico. The supply chain is so deeply integrated that a single car part, like a transmission or a wiring harness, might cross borders several times before the vehicle is finished. Each crossing is a step in a carefully choreographed dance, with parts moving to wherever the next specialized process happens most efficiently. This system isn't just about efficiency, it's what keeps costs down and makes cars affordable for millions of Americans. Without it, prices would skyrocket. In 2024, over half of the 8 million vehicles imported to the US came from Canada and Mexico, highlighting just how much we rely on our neighbors for the cars we drive every day. But when tariffs are imposed, this finely tuned machine grinds and stutters. Every time a part crosses the border, it gets taxed, sometimes multiple times for the same component. Imagine a wiring harness that needs to cross the border 3 times during production. Each crossing means another round of tariffs, piling on costs at every step. By the time it's installed in your car, it's been taxed so much that the price is no longer affordable. Multiply that by every part in a modern vehicle, and you can see how quickly costs spiral out of control. Some argue we should just bring all production back to the US, but that's not a realistic solution. Rebuilding the entire supply chain here would take decades, cost billions, and require a massive workforce that simply doesn't exist right now. Even auto industry leaders warn that while temporary tariffs might be manageable, permanent ones could force companies to close plants or move operations elsewhere, putting thousands of American jobs at risk. Ironically, a policy meant to protect American factories could end up shutting them down, leaving communities without jobs and empty buildings where thriving businesses once stood. The real strength of the North American auto industry is its integration. Engineers, workers, and companies collaborating across borders to build better, more affordable cars. So, what does all this mean for you and your wallet? Let's break down the impact on car prices and what you might pay at the dealership. For families, the tariffs hit hardest at the dealership. Analysts predicted new car prices would jump by $3,000, enough to push many buyers out of the market. For SUVs with lots of Mexican content, the price hike could reach $9,000 or more. Suddenly, a family car became a luxury item thanks to a tax from Washington. As new car sales dropped, used car prices soared, creating a vicious cycle where everyone paid more. The tariffs, meant to help, were pricing Americans out of essential purchases. Fewer sales meant less production, fewer shifts, and layoffs, hurting the very workers the policy aimed to protect. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce warned of recession and job losses on both sides of the border. The economic pain was spreading fast, but industry leaders and economists were united in their warnings. For once, car CEOs, union leaders, and economists agreed. The tariffs were a disaster. Ford, GM, and Stellantis all warned of existential threats to their business models. Stock prices tumbled, and leaders pleaded for a different path. Economists explained trade wars hurt everyone, raising prices and damaging relationships with key partners. Professor John Rogers summed it up. There's no way you can win a trade war. Everybody suffers. The warnings were clear, but the policy marched on, and America's neighbors weren't about to take it quietly. Canada and Mexico hit back hard. Prime Minister Trudeau called the tariffs a very dumb thing to do and launched retaliatory tariffs on $155 billion of U.S. goods. Ontario and Quebec banned American companies from government contracts and threatened to cut off power exports. Mexico's President Sheinbaum called the tariffs completely unjustified and announced her own countermeasures. Both countries saw the tariffs as a betrayal of decades of partnership. Retaliation was swift and targeted, closing off key export markets for American farmers and manufacturers. The result, a tit-for-tat trade war, hurting businesses and consumers on all sides. The US found itself isolated, with its largest trading partners now adversaries. The pain was no longer just economic, it was personal. Let's meet the people caught in the crossfire. The real cost of the trade war was measured in lost jobs and shattered security. In Canada, up to 1 million jobs were at risk: mechanics, engineers, truck drivers, and more. In the US, the very workers the tariffs were meant to help faced layoffs as car prices soared and demand fell. Small towns built around auto plants faced economic devastation as factories slowed or closed. The domino effect hit local businesses, schools, and families, forcing tough choices and stretching budgets to the breaking point. For many, the dream of a new car was replaced by the struggle to keep food on the table. The trade war wasn't just about numbers, it was about real lives upended. And the shock waves didn't stop at North America's borders. The tariffs didn't just hit North America, they escalated a global trade war, especially with China. China retaliated with tariffs on US agricultural exports, devastating American farmers. Trade wars rarely stay contained. One move can unravel global supply chains. International companies hesitated to invest, fearing instability and recession. The tariffs, meant to project American strength, instead sowed chaos and damaged alliances worldwide. Allies in Europe and Asia grew wary, seeking to diversify away from the US. The long-term result, a more fragmented, less cooperative world economy. America's own system of global trade, built over decades, was now at risk. The lesson was becoming painfully clear. Let's look at what the crisis taught us. The 2025 auto crisis exposed the dangers of protectionism in a globalized world. Tariffs, meant to protect, instead caused disruption, job losses, and economic pain. The Made in America label depends on North American cooperation. Break the chain and everyone suffers. Economic nationalism taken too far becomes self-harm. The real victims were workers and families, not foreign competitors. The trade war showed that isolation and confrontation lead to shared pain, not prosperity. The future depends on engagement, innovation, and cooperation, not building walls. It's a hard lesson, learned at great cost.